Georgia Nell Blevins went missing on July 4th, 1962, from Austin, Texas. At the time, she was 22 years old and estimated to have been 110 to 130 pounds. Georgia is listed as being white and anywhere from 5'4" to 5'7". She had brown hair and brown eyes. There isn't any more information about her on her NamUs profile. There have been 12 unidentified people excluded from her case, none from Texas. According to the Charlie Project, Georgia was last seen in Austin, Texas on July 4th, 1962, Independence Day. She lived with her infant daughter in the 1200 block of West 8th Street next door to her parents. The day she went missing, the family had planned to go to the park to watch the 4th of July fireworks, but Georgia stayed behind when they left, never showing up for the fireworks show. She was never heard from again. No police report was filed at the time, and Georgia wasn't officially reported missing until 2017, 55 years later. Due to the passage of time, the circumstances of her disappearance are unclear. An article from Fox 44 News states that Georgia was a mother of 4. Her daughter, Kimberly Pate, was 6 months old at the time and relocated with family to Waco. She only, Kimberly that is, had photographs that served as memories of her mother. Pate said, "No one hasn't heard from her or seen her since. We don't know what happened to her." Pate has relied on family stories to figure out what happened the summer her mother left. "My mother was fine. She was happy. The family was together at the park, and they went home later that afternoon to my grandparents," she said. No one knows what happened to her. And this is what brought her to the Austin Police Department's Cold Case Missing Persons Unit. A detective, Richard Faithfull, said, "We have verified that there is a Georgia Blevins that was born around the time that she should have been born. We got the birth certificate. There's no death certificate anywhere. And she basically fell off the face of the earth." Detective Faithfull said that Austin police had no idea that Georgia was missing until 2017. I took a report, basically, so we could get DNA, Faithfull said. The DNA was sent to NamUs, which having such DNA could help crack the case. There's thousands of missing persons across our country that are not really sitting in the morgues, but that are out there, that have been buried in indigent burials. Nobody has ever identified who they are, but we do have DNA profiles on them. Also from Detective Faithfull. Kimberly Pate is quoted as having said, "We checked to see if there might be some human remains or a Jane Doe that might be our mother. That's a start to giving us some peace and closure, and from there to find out what happened." Detective Faithfull had said, Austin, 55 years ago, was the quiet life, but now it's absolutely not. People have scattered to the 4 points, and Waco would be a nice place that a lot of people would move to from Austin. Things were done differently in 1962, with little protocol for officers to follow. Pate said her grandparents had a family friend who worked with the Georgetown police. A report was never filed, and there was never a paper trail. Family tales state that Pate's grandparents and the Georgetown officer did several searches in the area, but didn't turn up anything. Waco police say that their searchable database only goes back to 1997. though at the time of the 2017 article, there were 35 missing person cold cases with the police department. The Waco Police Department has changed databases several times, making it very difficult to find out who was missing before 1997. Of course, if you have any tips, you can call the Austin Police Department, which I will post the number on the screen here. I also want to point out that Georgia Blevins' Nameless page was created on January 10th, 2017. So by doing some of the math, if she was 22 in 1962, then that would mean she was born in either 1939 or 1940. Without some digging, you really wouldn't have any clue about her parents' names and if Blevins was her married name or maiden name, and who was the father of her kids. None of that information is readily available on like Name Us or even the Charlie Project, I believe. And initially I was wondering, was the baby left alone on the 4th of July? Or did Grandma and Grandpa take them to the show? Was there anything missing from the home? Now, modern-day 8th Street is basically the downtown area of Austin. And though it's residential with houses, it's within walking distance of 6th Street, which is arguably Austin's busiest part of downtown. Now, the official information available to the public is scant, like I was saying. But there is a thread about Georgia on Web Sleuths and another on Reddit where more details have been made available and can at least paint a fuller background on the type of person that Georgia was. On Web Sleuths, someone claiming to be Georgia's third child commented repeatedly in the thread. They repeatedly referred to Georgia as Nell and alleged that she was killed by a brother. This user, Wymond, is Wymond or Wymond, whatever. I'm just going to say Wymond. They created their Web Sleuth account on February 17th, 2020, with their first post on that same day. They have only made 11 posts. Everything from the Georgia Blevins thread. Well, that's only where they ever posted. This person first refers to Georgia as Georgia Nell, as stated before. And now they stated that Georgia had beautiful teeth and did see the dentist, according to one of Georgia's sisters, Yvonne Scott. Now, it wasn't until coming through Web Sleuths that it turns out Georgia's maiden name was Georgia Nell Scott. And that's something I wish would have been put in probably Name Us. But when she went missing, Georgia was married, so Georgia Blevins is her married name. Now, as for a police report, they stated that Georgia's parents had filed a report with the Austin Police Department, though in modern day the report couldn't be found. Supposedly, there was a fire in the 60s, and the report was among the things burned. Now, I meant to go look through this, but maybe later on when editing this video, I can put a blurb here or not, just to see or check if there actually was a fire at the Austin Police Department in the 60s, because I would like to know if that's true or not. Supposedly, Georgia worked at a pharmacy. She went to work on the 4th, then actually went to the park after work to meet up with friends. Wymond stated that her mother didn't actually disappear on the 4th of July. She just didn't come home, and then disappeared a few weeks later. When asked for potential names, Wymond admitted that they didn't know or have any confirmed names. She stated that there have been so many stories over the years. Her eldest sister apparently will never forget the last time she saw Georgia, their mother, and a cousin recalls the same sighting. This person on Web Sleuths did not have the best grammar, so reading through their posts was a little tough, and honestly for me, I kind of doubted some of the things that they said. But I'm always skeptical, personally. What I can decipher, though, from this is that there was at least one person who allegedly had seen Georgia after the 4th of July. This point has not been made anywhere else other than Web Sleuths, and I'm unsure if there were any sightings of Georgia by non-family members past the disappearance. People on Web Sleuths asked if there was any family drama or scandal that may have led to the family not to do much after her disappearance. Wyman stated that their family did look for her. The youngest of the four children did the missing persons report, quote, without involving us 3 older children. Our little sister wants to believe Nell was a saint, and that's simply not true. She hung out in bars and was notorious for not coming home. Sad but true. We just want closure. I am the 3rd born of the 4. Apparently, Georgia was associated with a man named Charles Maynard, though no further information is known about him, at least not in the threads from Web Sleuths or Reddit. On September 4th, 2019, a user named Firehat had posted in Web Sleuths about the Big Bend region of Texas as being one of the most remote areas of the lower 48, the continental U.S., for those that don't understand what that means. They had recently read about a body found dumped in the desert back in 1965. Firehat believed that there may have been a chance that this unidentified person would have been Georgia. They copy and pasted the articles from their post, of which, essentially, just to sum it up for the sake of brevity, I don't think I can actually even repeat this title without getting, in trouble. But initially, in Alpine, Texas, July 30th, 1965, there was an article about a Hispanic person that had found the body of a woman. This body of a woman was burnt, and it looked like homicide in around the Big Bend region, Big Bend National Park of Texas. It stated that the badly burned body of a 20 to 34-year-old white woman was found near the Rio Grande, 90 miles south of here being Alpine, Texas, and apparently had been there for about a month. So, at least the beginning of July, if not the last couple of days of June of 1965. A Mexican laborer had came across the body yesterday afternoon in desolate brush country about 1.5 miles east of Ranch Road 170 and about 3 miles from the hamlet Lajitas, just west of Big Bend National Park. There was indication that the woman was in a sleeping bag and that someone had thrown gasoline over the bag and set it on fire. For those that don't know, Lajitas and Big Bend National Park, all of that, the desert, that's around Terlingua, Texas. All of that is around the border by Mexico. It's really south. It's among the most southernmost parts of Texas, which I believe, I forgot when I looked last time, but that is a ways away from Austin, from the 8th Street of Austin. And not that a person couldn't end up going there if they decided to drive, but for me, it doesn't seem very likely that this random person who was murdered in 1965 would have been Georgia, because to me the distance is just too great. Now, later on, though, with this Jane Doe found around Lajitas, on August 5th, 1965, there was another article posted stating that she still remained unidentified. The remains were taken to Austin by the Texas Rangers for an examination by the Texas DPS. So, to quote from the second article, it stated that the bones were those of a young woman aged 25 to 35. The skin was fair, and the hair was finely textured and light brown. The teeth showed one cavity in the upper right seventh molar, and this was not repaired. The upper left fifth tooth was small and deformed. The teeth were regular, and from the substructures it was probable that the woman had nice features. There were no wisdom teeth, either upper or lower jaw, as a hereditary variation. The woman was estimated that her sitting height was about 32.5 inches, therefore she would have stood at about 5'4". Now, this article states that this Jane Doe had one cavity, a deformed tooth, and according to this person that allegedly was one of Georgia's daughters, Georgia went to the dentist and Georgia had good teeth. So, couldn't those dentals right there possibly already exclude this Jane Doe? But the third article came from April 13th, 1969, where the Jane Doe was called the Lady in Chartreuse, who was still considered a mystery in Lajitas and the burning greasewood fire. So even in 1969, there was still no idea on the identity of this woman. It was stated that Jane Doe was found on July 29th, 1965, a scorching summer day, when the two men had found the human skeletal remains near an old Candelia wax vat. Raymond and John Amendariz told officers they had stumbled across the bones by accident, and they said, actually, they had seen unusual buzzard activity in the area some 3 weeks earlier. So, at the end of June. Law enforcement reached the scene later in the day, and the following day, they began a 3-day search of the scene, but they didn't have much to go on. The remains were sent to Austin for analysis through the Texas DPS, which is Department of Public Safety. The report indicated that the bones were those of a woman between 30 and 40 years of age, 5'5" tall, give or take, with light brown and partially gray hair. She apparently had been wearing a light chartreuse shirt-type blouse, a light reversible jacket, and a green knit skirt or stretch pants. A dental expert reported the woman had never had any work done on her teeth. All of the woman's left ribs were broken or cracked. It appeared the woman's body had been placed in a plastic bag, soaked with a flammable liquid and burned. But there was no positive evidence the bullet had been the cause of death, actually, and there were no signs indicating that she might have been shot. There were tracks from a pickup truck which possibly carried a camper that led 1.5 miles off Texas 170 to the hill where the body was burned. The desolate area was searched by air, but nothing else turned up. All missing persons reports were checked, but in each case something prevented a name being matched with the remains. So about 2 months after the discovery of the skeleton, another mystery appeared on the site of the cremation of the Jane Doe. On it was lettered by nails driven into the wood, which was in Spanish, but it translates to "A corpse was found here on July 29th, 1965. I'm not going to read it right now in Spanish because I need to spell check it. The original post is full of errors, but so this mysterious cross had appeared on the hill sometime during the span of 2 months, the sheriff had said. They said that they would go back down there from time to time, thinking whoever put the body might return to the area, and there was this span of about 2 months that the sheriff didn't go there, and at that time period was when the cross had showed up. And though nearly the case being 4 years old at the time of this last article, it was not considered closed. One of the Texas Rangers on the case had purchased a small doll and had a local seamstress sew some doll clothes patterned after the garments that were found near Lajitas. Pictures of the doll, which even has brown hair, have circulated to the area law enforcement agencies. Sheriff Williams is quoted as having said, "If we could ever find anyone who could make positive identification of the remains, we'd have a lot more to go on. It's pretty hard to solve a slaying when you don't even know who was killed." Now, according to the articles, it seems that the woman would disqualify as Georgia, as the Jane Doe had never had any work done and had a deformed tooth and a cavity. According to Georgia's web sleuth's daughter, she had beautiful teeth and saw the dentist. So I'm unsure of the identity of that person and if that Jane Doe ever was even identified. Further, I don't think it's actually very mysterious of where that wooden cross came from. To me, especially since it was originally written in Spanish, I would assume that the Mexican laborers that found the Jane Doe were probably the ones that placed the cross. When you live in Texas, you actually see a lot of crosses on the side of the road, unfortunately, when you know what that means. On February 24th, 2020, Wyman stated that the sheriff they contacted responded and was working on the cold case. From there, they couldn't comment any further on the case, at least their belief that a brother had killed Georgia. And they have not commented or posted anything on that account since. On May 18th, 2023, Michelle Wrights commented with some info on the Blevins family. Donald Lee Blevins and Georgia Nell Scott were married on March 10th, 1957. Donald was born on September 16th, 1940. Georgia was born on August 29th, 1939. When they married, she was 17 and he was 16. Her last child was Kimberly Gale Blevins Pate, who was born on February 16th, 1962. The Blevins children are listed as having been Carol Ann Blevins, born November 9th, 1957, 9 months after their parents married; Gary Lee Blevins, born November 4th, 1959, and Kimberly Gale Blevins, of course, born February 16th, 1962. Michelle stated that she couldn't find any info on a fourth child. She couldn't find any information and looked through multiple sites. She found census records, their marriage certification, but nothing on having 4 children. Michelle noted how, in the obituary of Georgia's mother, Georgia is referred to as Nell, and stated to have been living in Ohio. When looking into this lead, there was a Nell Scott who lived in Ohio, though what she found didn't seem to be our Nell Scott. The Ohio person had a married name of Sutton and had lived in the state of Ohio for decades. Michelle found an obituary for a Donald Lee Blevins that had also been born on September 16th, 1940. The same day and year as the one that, of course, married Georgia. The obituary for Donald Lee Blevins, as the one from the Web Sleuth's thread, states that he passed away on March 2nd, 2022, in his home at Keller, Texas. He graduated from Keller High School and earned a degree in civil engineering from the University of Texas at Austin. Don married his high school sweetheart, Kay, and raised 3 daughters. He was survived by his wife of 58 years, Kay, and daughters Kim Blevins, Karen Jung, and Kristen James. According to one of the posts from Michelle, Don Blevins married Kay on January 4th, 1963, which would be 6 months after Georgia Blevins disappeared. It is unknown, though, if there truly was a connection between him and Georgia, though there are too many similarities for me to ignore. For reference, though, Keller, Texas is in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, which is a few hours north of Austin. There is a Find a Grave page for this Donald Blevins, who is stated to have been cremated. Honestly, these details are pretty confusing, I won't lie. And a lot of the story doesn't make sense, by and large. There are no real details about the date of Georgia's disappearance, let alone what the real date might have even been. Who was the person posting on Web Sleuths with this alleged info about being the third child of Georgia's 4 children, only for there to have been 3 children located and recorded in the state records? Was Donald Blevins from Keller, Texas, the same Donald that married Georgia? What was the point of any of these articles from the Big Bend area 6 hours away from Austin? Some people on Reddit believe the Web Sleuth person as being very likely to have been one of Georgia's children. But what doesn't make sense is the birth order. This person claimed to have been the third of 4. Kimberly Pate, the one mentioned in the Fox 44 article, was supposedly the 4th. But Michelle Freeman, who was the author on Web Sleuths, Michelle writes, she showed that there might have only been 3 kids. A record on Family Search shows that Kimberly Gail Blevins was born on February 16, 1962, in Travis County, Texas, which is the Austin area. The father is listed as Donald Lee Blevins. A record shows that Donald Lee Blevins was born on September 16, 1940, in Tarrant County, Texas. It should be noted that Keller, Texas is within Tarrant County. This record shows that Donald's parents were Weldon Lee Blevins and Opal McLendon. These people are also linked to the Donald Blevins that is on Find a Grave. Another record shows that Donald had a daughter named Karen Camille Blevins, who was born on February 23, 1965 in Tarrant County. Her mother is named Glenda K. Jarvis. There is a record of a Stacy Darlene Blevins born on January 7, 1974 in Smith, Texas. Her father is listed as Donald Lee Blevins and mother Clara Darlene McCoy. Smith, Texas is in the Tyler, Texas area, which is about an hour east of Dallas. A Kimberly K. Blevins was born on August 25, 1963, in Tarrant County, whose parents were Donald and Glenda K. A Kristen Michelle Blevins was born on May 29, 1970, to Donald and Glenda in Tarrant County. Of course, there are the other children, whose mother was Georgia Nell Scott. And after looking through these records, I was pretty shocked. I thought, is Papa a Rolling Stone? It seems to be that Donald Lee Blevins fathered 7 children. The children mentioned in his obituary are the ones that he had with Glenda K. So he had another daughter named Kim, and then, of course, Karen and Kristen. And it should be noted that, yes, he had 2 daughters named Kimberly, spelled the same exact way. Glenda K. Jarvis, Donald's second wife, may have been born on April 3rd, 1944 in Tarrant County. Despite finding multiple mentions of Donald Lee Blevins in newspapers, there has never been a single mention of Georgia Nell Scott or Blevins past her marriage certificate to Donald. So I tried looking for unidentified people that were similar to Georgia's case, and unfortunately there doesn't seem to be any clear-cut similarities to her description and the Jane Does. I typically look on NamUs, and that's where I started first. The earliest one A partially skeletonized person with parts missing was found on November 1st, 1962. This person was found in Harris County, Texas, the Houston area, and is described as black, female, 40 to 60 years old, that may have died in 1962 or the year prior. The height and weight were estimated, though there was no actual number. Jane Doe's name's profile was created on October 14th, 2008, and described as an isolated skull. The torso, limbs, and hands were not discovered. There haven't been any comparisons to her case. And even though the few details to her would very likely rule her out from being Georgia, I did include this Jane Doe just because of the age of her case. The second oldest Jane Doe was found on January 1st, 1967 in Pearland, Texas, which is still the Houston area. She's described as being a white female, height and weight unknown. Many of her details are actually unknown, as she was found as partially skeletonized remains. Her NamUs profile was created on September 16th, 2016. There are also no comparisons to her case. A third woman was found on September 14th, 1968 in Houston, Texas. She's described as having been 30 to 50 years old, white, 5'4", though her estimated time of death was 2 months prior, so about July of 1968. Jane Doe's remains were found in a drainage ditch, skeletonized with all parts recovered. Unfortunately, she was still unrecognizable. There have been 2 exclusions to her case, though none are from Texas. I also checked the Texas Missing Person Clearinghouse, which doesn't have any other potential cases, nor is Georgia even listed on that site. The Doe Network does not have Georgia either, though they do have a profile for the 1968 Jane Doe that I mentioned prior. The Doe Network makes note of the dentals that the only filling was in tooth 20, and her cause of death was unknown. Honestly, I have no idea what might have happened to Georgia, though I have my speculations. Considering that Donald Blevins had 2 other wives, along with one that might have been married to him the same time as he was married to Georgia, I wonder if she knew about the other women. Was Georgia really at the bars all the time? Was her husband constantly cheating on her? It seems that we can't answer any of the questions without knowing more about Georgia's family situation. If she walked away, where did she go? Is she possibly one of the Jane Does mentioned earlier? There are so many questions which I'm not sure if any of the remaining family members can answer. Georgia's sister Yvonne died on December 22nd, 2021, at 86 years old. Georgia is not mentioned in her obituary. In 1975, Georgia's father died, and she is not mentioned either. There is a lot to this case that doesn't make sense, and it seems like a family mystery way too deep for just one member of the public to understand. I looked at the newspapers to try and find any of those articles about the Lajitas Jane Doe, which was originally posted on Web Sleuths. I saw one from the Odessa American from July 1965. It had more details about the burned woman and the belief that she may have been a different missing person. According to this article, the Jane Doe was probably murdered, and her body carried in a plastic bag to the isolated spot where the killer drenched her in gasoline and set her on fire. At the time of the article, there was speculation that the Jane Doe could have been one of two missing co-eds from Texas University in Austin, who had been missing for the past 2 weeks. Officers said early in their investigation that the body was neither of the students'. The body was found by a Mexican laborer about 2 miles east of the tiny adobe community of Lajitas. There was a bulldozed trail that led from the highway to the spot where the body was discovered. Brewster County Sheriff Carl Williams and Texas Ranger Arthur Hill of Alpine found a bullet near the body indicating that the woman had been shot before being burned. Officers also found scraps of a green dress and scraps of underclothing, which were to be shipped to the DPS laboratory in Austin, along with the skeleton. A portion of a plastic bag was also found at the scene. An examination of the skeleton indicated that the woman was in her mid-20s or early 30s. She was about 5'4" and had light brown hair. Authorities believe the woman was disposed prior to the Texas co-eds' disappearance, who were Shirley Ann Stark and Susan Rigsby, who were both 21. The slaying was estimated to have occurred in June. The victim was fully clothed when she was burned, they said. A preliminary examination of the woman's skull showed no bullet hole or evidence of a fracture. The remains were not sufficient to permit a further analysis. Some of the bones burned, and others were scattered by animals. The skull, backbone, and pelvis remained intact. Strands of hair, which were lying against the earth when the body was set ablaze, indicated that the woman was white. The woman had had no dental work, which was unlikely in the case of the missing co-eds. She did have one large cavity. The absence of dental work plus the estimated time of death led to the early conclusion that the body was not one of the students. Authorities believe that the woman and her killer were local residents. The trail which led to the body could not have been found by a person not familiar with the area. Apparently, no effort had been made to conceal the body after it was dumped in the lonely canyon. The murderer also apparently did not wait to watch the body burn. Another article from the San Angelo Standard-Times talked about this Jane Doe and brought up how the chances were slim of it being a missing girl from the town. The closest link was a chipped tooth, but the chipped tooth on the burned body was found to have been caused by the intense heat from when the body was burned. DPS lab technicians said that the chip was relatively new. The only other clue was a bra that was found. The missing girl from San Angelo was 18 years old and had been missing for about a month. Her parents last heard from her by postcard, which came from Fort Stockton, Texas, which is about 2.5 hours away. The general area and the date of her disappearance led to the conjecture that the body was hers. Brewster County Health Officer Dr. W.E. Lockhart indicated that the body had been at the scene for about a month after being burned by the time it was found. I can't find an archive of the article that talks about the Mexican laborer who found the Lajitas Jane Doe, but the other articles I have here are proof that the event did happen. Just to clarify a little bit, I really couldn't find some of the articles that were posted exactly on Web Sleuths, but various articles from other newspapers do still confirm this whole event happening. As for the missing co-eds, they were found deceased. They deserve a segment for themselves, and I'll make a separate video about them. But for now, it turns out that the girls were homicide victims, targeted by James Cross. Both women were buried at Roseland Cemetery Park in Dallas, Texas. An article from the San Angelo Standard-Times dated August 2nd, 1965, talked about the discovery of the Jane Doe. Many of the details we already know by now, but they provided more information, such as the bones of a right hand and a few tattered and scratched or scrotched rags of clothing, being the only clues. A 16-man team of the Brewster County Rescue Squad scoured the area that the body had been found in. Among the clothing found was also a heavy piece of material which was believed to be a girdle. 4 other human bones were found near the body where the body was first discovered. All 4 arms and legs were missing. Dr. Lockhart stated that the hands and other bones belonged to the body. Sheriff Williams said he had answered about 25 calls from people who feared that the body might have been someone they knew. All were discounted, most of them because the missing people had dental work. The body had no fillings or braces. On August 7, 1965, the San Angelo Standard-Times posted an article that talked about the hole in the left shoulder of the Jane Doe. She was referred to as Brewster County's mysterious chartreuse lady, and apparently the hole wasn't caused by a bullet. DPS laboratory manager J.A. Chastain stated, "The only hole we found was a deterioration hole in the left shoulder, not a bullet hole." Texas Ranger Arthur Hill and Brewster County Sheriff Carl Williams speculated that the hole was made by a bullet. "That kind of shoots the air out of my sails," Williams said. "But I'm not going to be too discouraged until I get the complete laboratory report. Until then, we're just groping in the dark." Chastain said that he had no idea how the woman died. There was no evidence of blood on the shreds of clothing found. Only a small hole in a t-shirt, which was part of the woman's apparel, remained unidentified. But that hole wasn't on her left side and probably wasn't caused by a bullet. A discoloration of the bra was originally thought to be congealed blood, but it turned out to be burn marks. At the time of the article, the lab report was not complete, still needing several more days. "Only thing we can get more on is her age," said Chastain. The DPS lab already determined she was over 40 and maybe as old as 45. A slug found at the scene was also remained a mystery. The DPS lab was trying to determine the caliber. Hill and Williams have described it as being either a 32 or a 38 caliber. The lobloid slug is flat at one end and on one side, but officers are not sure this has anything to do with the mystery. The slug was found near the scorched earth where the body had been placed, doused in liquid fuel, and of course burned. It may have fallen out of the body as animals moved it around, Hill theorized. Chastain did not put much weight on the fact that the woman may have been dead more than a month, possibly since last winter. "Her clothes were not real heavy," he said, "and if it gets as cool as I hear it does out there at night, this could have happened fairly recently." Chastain said from the condition of the body, only its skeleton, it will be impossible to determine how long the woman had been dead. Information obtained already from the lab tests have been described as fantastic, though, by some of the authorities. University of Texas anthropologist Dr. Thomas McKern was credited with attaining most of the information about the body. "It is just a matter of education and how to measure bones and look at them," Chastain said. The lab determined that Jane Doe had had at least one child. "You can measure the bones of the arm and leg to tell the height," Chastain said. The skeleton was 5'4", but this is not a true height because of the condition of the body. Chastain said the woman was between 5'2" and 5'6". Chastain said the only real clue to her identity is her clothing. The woman was decked out in a bright chartreuse blouse, which buttoned up the front, and she had chartreuse capri pants. She also wore a lightweight turquoise car coat, which zipped up the front. Dressed like that, surely someone saw her, said Sheriff Williams. Another article came out on August 6, 1965, by the San Angelo Weekly Standard, talking about the Jane Doe. This time talking about how the broken tooth could have been a clue or indicator that this was the missing girl from San Angelo. For some reason, they never mentioned this girl's name. An article from the San Angelo Standard-Times, dated August 5, 1965, noted that the girl missing from San Angelo was actually okay, after sending her parents a letter saying that she was only vacationing in Comfort, Texas. Even though the paper stated that the full results of the autopsy were to be revealed in about a week, which would have been around the third week of August, 1965, I cannot find any information about those results. I suppose they are just not available to read online or may not have ever even been reported. The 1969 article about the case still being open was written by Mike Cox of the San Angelo Standard-Times on April 13, 1969. The men who found her were named as Raymond and John Amandaris, which I believe the Web Sleuths articles had posted that too. The article states that the remains were of a woman who was 30 to 40 years old, 5'5", with light brown and partially gray hair. She apparently had been wearing a light chartreuse shirt-type blouse, a light reversible jacket, and a green knit skirt or stretch pants. A dental expert reported that the woman had never had any work done on her teeth. All of the woman's left ribs were broken or cracked. There were tracks from a pickup truck, possibly carrying a camper, that led 1.5 miles off Texas 170 to the hill where the body was burned. The desolate area was searched by air, but nothing turned up. And I would just like to point out before I forget that I never did see any information about what hill, what part over in Lajitas that the body was burned at. I doubt that it would still be around today, but it would have been kind of interesting to see if any of those markers or crosses or whatever still existed where this woman was found. Lajitas, Texas is a very remote part of Texas, sometimes even lumped in with the ghost town of Terlingua, a border town only minutes away from Mexico. There is a lot of unknown and undocumented information about it today. Even looking through it on Google Maps, there are some roads that haven't been updated since 2008. The town has been turned into a golf resort, and I have no idea, once again, if that cross that was placed at the burn site is even still around. I would think it would be really interesting to see or to know whether or not people today know that this crime even happened. The chartreuse lady wasn't mentioned again until 1978 in a May 21st article. It was much of the same info as we had known before. A few more details were brought up, such as a person in Presidio, Texas, that thought they had seen her. But that person didn't have all the answers, and the probe moved slowly. Officials speculated that the woman who'd been killed was murdered between a month to half a year before the remains were discovered. The cross left at the burn site was left by one of the men who found her. There were no leads from that cross. Sheriff Williams said that the county spent several $100s in addition to the man-hours investigating the lady. And at one point, a rescue squad made a shoulder-to-shoulder search of the grounds, looking for minute clues that might have been missed earlier. Got little coverage on TV, but gained a lot of publicity in the papers. Sheriff Williams explained that after the photo of the doll had been circulated, 60 to 70 missing person leads had been eliminated. Several leads received by phone helped formulate the main theory concerning the case. Anonymous tips were made, which Sheriff Williams said helped in the case. He stated, "We feel that if the case is ever solved, it will be out of Louisiana. We had quite a few things that led to a possible suspect there, but we never could come up with anything solid enough to go with, so the case reached a stalemate." The only real files on the Chartreuse lady remain in Brewster County, at least at the time of this article from 1978. I could not find any articles on the Chartreuse lady after the 1978 one. The closest thing I could find was a 2021 article from Authentic Texas, where the author Randall Kinsey spoke with the now retired Sheriff Carl Williams, and they had spoken about unsolved crime on his watch, of which the Chartreuse lady was brought up. Williams stated that no one could provide a clue, and by the time DNA collection was viable, the bones had already been disposed. So, unfortunately, I guess we'll never know who that lady was, what she was doing, and where she came from. I am unsure what disposal really means, what it means in this sense. Tossed out as medical waste, buried in an unmarked grave, given to some guy for his private collection. I have no idea. There isn't any more information out there about her. I looked at the La Hita Cemetery on Find a Grave, and there weren't any unmarked graves online. But it should be noted that the cemetery is considered 87% photographed, so there may be more there than available online. And from personal experience, I just want to throw out that sometimes you'll come across cemeteries in person that are not marked or even posted about online. Anyway, the closest thing to an unmarked grave in the La Hita Cemetery is one that says just Jake, also known as Jake Unknown on Find a Grave. Though exhaustive in research, I still have doubts that the Chartreuse lady was Georgia, though knowing that the Jane Doe had had at least one child, it does open up the possibility to me. The only caveat are the dentals, which, if what the web sleuth daughter said was true, Georgia's dental work would still disqualify her as the Chartreuse lady. It's a lose-lose either way. Either Georgia was the Chartreuse lady and somehow ended up at the border, getting killed, and her body forever gone, disposed by authorities. Or she wasn't the Chartreuse lady, and we have no clue where she went at all. Even worse, the Chartreuse lady was never identified, and her remains are gone forever, in a place completely unknown. Beyond that, I have no idea what could have happened to either of these girls.